So thank you for having me. Like I said, I talk about flow all the time, so I'm like, I can't say flow. I can't just beat that drum. Feng Shui. Feng Shui is like flow. Some of you guys probably remember Feng Shui from the 80s. It was kind of a hip thing for doing interior design and whatnot. And literally it means wind, water. And it's all about allowing energy to flow. And we've had a lot of talks throughout the day about flow in different parts of our business. I'm much more interested in the macro sort of sense, organizationally. What brought me to this originally was I am a system administrator. I was a system administrator. I am a system administrator. The thing is, I realized sometime around 2004, the system that I was administrating was no longer an operating system. It was now an organization. It was a distributed system. It was a macro system. But the way I needed to approach it was the same, and thankfully the skills that I had developed to become a good system administrator transferred over fairly well. Adrian and I got sun representing going on here. But energy flowing is a really important thing. One thing that I've become more and more aware of in the last couple of years is just how important emotional energy is, right? We talk about qi in Feng Shui, but really in a practical sense, it's emotional energy, our desire, some of the things we heard about in the previous talk. The things that we put into it, right? We can all feel in a company when that amount of energy diminishes. Right? In a macro level, what we want is all of our systems to flow. We want emotionally to flow, and really, at the end of the day, I'm really interested in seeing that people have a pride of workmanship. This is one of the most important things, I think, to people, is to feel fulfilled. To go to bed at night and feel like, I learned something, I helped someone, I grew a little bit. The world is a slightly better place tonight, and to feel that sense of satisfaction. And that really means allowing energy to sort of flow. So flow. What is flow? This is nature's idea of flow, right? It's beautiful, it moves. Just thinking about water is a really inspiring thing, right? If you've gone through any of the GTD stuff, one of the things that David Allen will talk about is mind like water, right? When you throw a rock at the water, it doesn't seize up before the rock comes. After the rock is fallen, it ripples, and then it returns. Flow is sort of a natural sort of thing. But this is what human beings think of as flow. It's all very exciting, right? We like things to be exciting. And in the business world, we think this is flow. It's so simple, right? I mean, look, we have a graph. For a long time, I've gone around, and for a long time I've said, this is the DevOps flow. We have requirements, the business people over here on the left, they feed those things into our development organizations. Development produces a good in software. That gets fed into the operations organization, which then presents it as a service to customers. Customers consume that and feed those requirements back in. And this is our big meta flow. Some of you might be looking at this and being like, I don't know if that seems right. That seems kind of like the old way of doing things. I agree with you. Because thanks to the work that many of you have done, thanks to the power of continuous deployment, things have changed a bit. We now sort of have this pipeline, and no longer do we have this handoff from one organization to another, and we're just trying to smooth the integration between those two organizations. Now we have a pipeline that we can all sort of feed into. And now we have to be concerned about when we merge all the little streams and rivers, how they feed in together nicely. We've got a lot of great examples of organizations that have done that exceptionally well. Netflix being one of our favorites to always talk about. So in the new flow, and maybe this isn't right, this is ongoing thinking, right? This is changing in the industry as we go along, and it depends on your organization, which we'll talk about more. You have this sort of continuous deployment pipeline, particularly in a web service, where we inject things into it. That is consumed by customers. Customers are interacted with via humans, via sales and marketing and support. And this feeds into governance. Governance is something I've been really interested in, but it's not something I hear many people talk about. And I got super excited just last week. I was going through a bunch of talks and saw Dan North do a talk where he talked about the big thing we're missing, governance. I was like, yes, on the right track. Governance is a hard thing. One of the things that's the hardest part about governance and all this is a lot of us come to these conferences, we read the books and it says, look, all you need to do to have a well-running organization is do these 20 things. Once you got those 20 things, it's all done. You're going, I don't think I can do 3 things. You want me to do 20? How am I supposed to keep all those plates spinning? Not so easy. That's where the governance portion becomes really important. I think is going to be a big part of the next leg of our journey. And when we look at any of these flows, it always has to be done in the context of systems thinking. This is what underlines all these concepts for me. We have to remember that a system is a whole that cannot be divided into independent parts. The best, I think, of all the writers on systems thinking, the best one is Russell Ackoff. He's really talked about this really well. When we take a great system and we take it apart into its pieces, they cease to have any real value. They're only really valuable when they're together as a whole. And the essential properties of the system are those which none of those parts independently have. So we're not interested in the sum of the behavior of the parts. We're interested in the interactions. That's where flow comes from. It's the product of their interactions. So when we look at flow, whatever it is, what we're really interested in is not just the macro flow, but the feedback loops between each of these components. And in any of these, there are going to be smaller feedback flows in between them. And when we think about feedback, we have to kind of evolve our thinking instead of and stop thinking about cause and effect. Because in a feedback loop, the cause and the effect can be related and can feed on each other, right? And so looking at all these feedback loops, optimizing those feedback loops is really important. I commonly like to say DevOps has 3 primary components: collaboration of people, the convergence of process, and the creation and exploitation of tools, right? Kind of an old idiom, right? People, process, tools. But when we look at some of the places where we derive our core principles, Agile is certainly one of them. This is one of those things that I find every time I look back at the Agile Manifesto, I find new things, new truths. There are some parts of this we're very good at. The other parts, not so good. Working software, Scrum, and a number of our development philosophies have helped us with that. Customer collaboration, arguable, depends. Responding to change, I think we spent a lot of time in getting good at responding to change, shortening feedback cycles and really getting good at responding to change. Individuals and interactions over process and tools. I feel like we spend a lot of time with process and tools. Not so much on the individuals and interactions. And more so, we've tried to build new processes and tools in order to help us with the individuals and interactions. Kind of interesting. Lean, right? I think a lot of us, one of the reasons we're interested in flow, right, is we see that Agile's not enough, right? Where did Agile draw its principles from so that we can draw on those independently and evaluate them? Lean's certainly where some of those came from. The Lean Enterprise Institute has these 5 principles listed as theirs. There's many lists depending on who you ask, but this is LEI's. Identify value, map value stream, create flow, establish goal, and seek perfection. That's continuous improvement. So that's it. And one of my favorites also is Deming's system for profound knowledge. Appreciation for a system. That's the systems thinking component, approaching all things with the systems thinking point of view. Knowledge of variation. Donald really talked about this, I think, very well. Variation is something that we still struggle a lot with, and I see a lot of places where we're making real advances in understanding variation in IT. Theory of knowledge, right? This is the PDSA, PDCA, right? Building knowledge in a scientific, repeatable sort of way. In psychology, this is something that we need to spend a lot more time on, because we're focusing a lot on tools and process, not so much on people and the psychology. One thing that when I do think about flow, I was kind of writing down a small sort of treatise, and it sort of occurred to me that really if we back all the way out and think about what flow is, value flow, really it's kind of interesting to think of $1 comes from a customer into a business, and it goes through a value stream. And as it goes through, we take little pieces of that dollar, and we replace it with something. We take another piece of the dollar, we replace it with something, and eventually we give that dollar back to the customer, but this time it's not a dollar bill, it's the thing they want. And I think it's kind of interesting to kind of go all the way back to what are we fundamentally doing, right? What is value to a customer? I give you some money, I want to get something that is equal or greater in value to me than the dollar that I just gave you. Just a fun way to think about it. And when I get stuck a lot thinking about how flow should work and how I need to approach things, what am I doing? I like to think about my competitors. I like to think about other industries and how they do it. Restaurant has always been interesting to me because it's a great example of flow. When a restaurant works well, flow is evident. When something breaks down, it's also very evident. We've all had good and bad experiences. The kitchen's got to work, the supply chain's got to work, the waitresses have got to work, there has to be good psychology, people have to be happy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Restaurants, I think, sometimes just thinking of how would this work, and making sure that when I look at things, implementing things in my shop, that I'm not straying too far off this crazy path. It might be helpful to you. So we all love patterns, right? And so I've taken some of the mountain of things that I've consumed and tried to distill them down into sort of a pattern. Like I said, we're talking macro here. Because I find when you look over all the management writing of the last 100 years, at some point they all loop back on themselves, right? And you spend too much time going back and forth between different people's work over the last 100 years, and at some point you can't remember whose idea is whose, because it's all cumulative, which is it's a great thing. So distilling these down, I've got these patterns. Start with why. It's definitely one of the most important. What are you doing? Why do you exist? Why do you go to work in the morning? Why do you pay your bills? Why do you spend time with your kids? Why do you do anything? In our businesses, we definitely need to know what we're doing. Intentionality is really, I think, is generally the key to anything. You read any book on anything, it's always going to tell you what you really need to do is just think very intently on what it is that you want to do and be intentional about what it is that you want. Whether you're trying to improve your marriage or you're trying to become a better race car driver or you're trying to improve your business. Just be very intentional about that one thing. Problem is, now I've got to be intentional about everything all the time. How do I do that? Well, you have to converge with what your fundamental goals and values are. Simon Sinek, I think, really articulated this very well in his book, Start With Why, but by no means this is a new idea, nor did it start with him. I think he just articulated it very, very well. When we start with why, we can approach systems from a fundamental point of view to make sure that they're designed for the purpose that they need to be designed for. The systems which simply emerge tend to be bad systems. Then you become a gardener, not a designer. Deming's 5 Deadly Diseases. Yeah, you can find a great YouTube video. Anytime I feel sad, I just watch Deming and just watch him get mad at everyone, and it's fun. Number one has always been the most important to me here in the Silicon Valley particularly, lack of constancy of purpose. People don't know why they're in business. And while there's a lot of great things that have come through Eric Ries and the lean startup movement, the overemphasis on pivots drives me insane. If you're realizing that the thing that you want to do, the vision that you have, is a good vision, but your implementation is bad, by all means, pivot. Change your direction in order to do that. But when you decide that your purpose is to make money and to be the next big thing, so we're just going to completely pivot our company and go in a different direction, fundamentally flawed. When you go through all these, the one thing that really rings true with Deming is short-term thinking. He really gets mad about people who do not have a long-term vision, a long-term idea of what they want to do and how they're going to do it, appreciating the resources that they have. Once you have a vision, and visions start with individuals, right? This is why you have the iconic founder. He has the vision that holds everyone accountable. Once you've got that, you've got to build trust. Trusting relationships. Simon Sinek says that when we're with people who believe what we believe, trust emerges, right? Everyone has to get behind the vision. When people get together behind a vision and have a common purpose, suddenly amazing things happen. And it's not because you need to go to some offsite team building exercise. It's not because you need to go through all these different kind of workshops and programs. That's not necessary, right? Anyone who's been in a foreign country, here's an accent from a California accent and goes, hey, how's it going? We're all friends, right? You trust them slightly more than you trust anyone else. You don't know them, but you have something in common. You believe something similar. I find particularly with those relationships that are strained, that normally one-on-one conversations outside the office is the most effective way in order to do that. Get outside of the environment where you don't have all those cues around you. You can have honest conversations. This is really important for leaders. If leaders don't work together, we're in a whole world of hurt. And there's a lot of great writing on these topics. Toxic workplace, the no asshole rule is one of my favorites. It's really important that we have trusting relationships, because if we don't have that, we're not going to meet any of the other goals that we need. We're going to, at best, optimize in small portions of our companies and not as a whole. Success really depends on being truthful, and we've seen this from a lot of people who have had great success. In order to really have a good, lean culture, you have to be able to go to somebody else and tell them bad news. And we have a culture that we want to always say the right thing. There's no problem, right? The Japanese were famous of saying when they partnered with GM here in the Bay Area, that the Americans would constantly say, there's no problems, right? They would say, no problem is problem. We have to be really honest with each other. And when we have failures, when we have challenges, we have to be honest about that. We have to have people that we know that will listen and not judge us, not throw it in our face, not blame, right? Blameless cultures. We talk a lot about blameless postmortems in DevOps, but blameless culture in general is important. We have to have trust in order to build these kinds of systems that really embody flow. And once you've done that, you can start to share the vision and align the culture. You've got to spread it out. It's amazing how many companies you go into and you talk to their executives and they have this great vision about this great thing that's totally awesome and it's going to change the world. And then you go ask the guy in support and he's like, I don't know, there's a queue and I do the tickets. Why doesn't that person know? Right? If we really, really want to change, if we really want to do amazing things, we have to propagate all the way down to the individual workers. The janitor should know what your vision is, because then we can enable the people who best understand the organization and the system to improve it. This is the real trick to having a bottom-up instead of top-down sort of leadership structure. Conway's Law, the first time I read Conway's Law, it sort of made a lot of things make sense. Business organizations that I just couldn't understand, and I was never quite sure why they didn't work, and I heard Conway's Law, and I'm just like, that's exactly it, right? I'm sure many of you had a similar sort of thing, right? When we, organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of their organizations. Fix your org chart first. This is something in Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, which I've kind of already referenced, and I'll sort of reference some more. This one cut me to the bone. He says, this is a snippet out of his book. In the larger context, there is a reason we're doing it, where we have vision. When we forget that reason, the vision, when we forget that reason, we get caught up in an unceaseless treadmill of problem solving. And the irony of that is that the best we ever get is an absence of problems. When I heard that, it cut me to the bone, because I realized in a lot of cases what I was doing is I had all this technical debt. I was trying to work out all my technical debt so I can get it caught up, and I thought that all this momentum would take me out of the red and into the black, and off we go. And what happened? I got a good ways out, then I got tired, then we slowed down, and then at some point we felt, we can relax. And then we just waited until more problems came. All the energy had been expended. I won't get into technical debt because that would take a while. I think generally technical debt is massively overemphasized and overrated. Okay, so value stream mapping, fundamental to lean. We start with resources, we add value, we provide it to the customer. Like I said, we looked at a couple different ways of what value streams can look like, what flows can look like at the meta level, and looking at the individual value streams and understanding them. We've got tons of great books and resources to help us with this. We have to visualize the system. It's really, 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 really hard to improve a system that you don't fully understand. And it is amazing how many of us are trying to do kaizen events and different types of system improvements. We don't understand the fundamental underlying system. Then you've got everyone else in your company who's outside of that flow, who just contributes to the flow, and they're like, I don't even know where I fit in the picture, so I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. We have to understand our systems. And value stream mapping is a darn good way to do it. There are good books on it. Value stream mapping is one, learning to see. But honestly, I don't care if you use an honest-to-goodness value stream map like you see in the manufacturing stuff, or if you just use a Visio diagram. It doesn't matter. What's important is that you understand the system. We need to understand our vision. Where are we going? We need to build relationships. And then we need to look at the system that we have, because let's face it, most of us aren't starting a startup, so which means we're overhauling existing organizations. Get that system down on paper. Then we can start to have rational conversations about it. Standardized work. Now, standardized work means different things to different people. And this is the part where a lot of people are like, oh, I just have to like churn out the bit and stamp the part, you know, and then it's like manufacturing. The thing that generally I think people need to standardize is the way in which they attack problems, the way in which you solve problems, the way in which you think about things. You don't need to standardize every little component. Now, it's good if you do, and I think that you should if you can. But we need to focus not just on standardizing individual processes, but the way in which we go about designing processes, so that as we scale up the organization, we continue to do things in a repeatable sort of way. There are lots of good systems for managing flow in the value system. I think we have a lot of great tools now that help us with this. Kanban, a number of the different systems that are used with Lean and whatnot. We want to visualize that flow wherever we can, in whatever way is most appropriate. I think that's something that people get a lot. I do not think that managing flow is incompatible with ITIL. A lot of people think it is. But again, that's where people just get too locked into an old mindset, and they don't free up their mind to take the good ideas out of something like ITIL or COBIT or whatever it is and apply them to the new reality. The elimination of waste is always something that we want to be attacking, but we also have to be very free about muda, about futility, right? I do like the word muda over waste because waste can have some certain baggage on it. What is futile? What are you investing time and energy into that contributes nothing to the value stream, that doesn't benefit anyway? It's just busy work. That requires being really honest. And for some people, it will hurt. There are people in our organizations that are doing jobs that don't need to be done. But we don't want to eliminate them because we like people. And so those are sometimes we will see certain parts of the organization where we're like, but I really like John, so let's work on that part of the system over there. It happens. We want to stamp out waste and futility wherever we see it. A lot of these can be meetings you don't need to have. There's a lot of good, I think, execution patterns that can help us stamp out waste. 40X is one that I've been looking at over the last year that's really kind of helpful. But we always want to be stamping out muda, but we want to be doing it through kaizen, which means literally change for the better, right? And we want to do this using PDCA. PDCA really is just the scientific method. We want to be very intentional about how we go about these things. And kaizen needs to be driven, true improvement needs to be driven by the stakeholders, and empowered by the management. The people who know how to fix the stuff are the people doing it every day, right? We don't need the room of architects, and I think that's one of the great things about the movement of lean infiltrating is I think we're seeing this idea of the guys going off into the room and figuring everything out and then sort of delivering it as a doc down to the people is sort of over. Every time I see a company that still does it that way, I cringe. There's still a lot of them out there. The big thing that we have to really get across, particularly as practitioners, as people sharing with others, is that we always want to focus on the problem, not the solution, the problem. Too often we have a problem and we go in with a solution before we even really fully understand the problem, the depth, the complexity, and the available options in order to handle that. So we ultimately end up implementing something that's really cool because we saw it on Hacker News, and therefore it must be the new thing. Thanks, Adrian. I'm sorry. Netflix is doing it, so do it. But the funny thing is the people who do the really cool things, the people that are hip, they're not doing anything that somebody else does just because it's hip, right? So why are we kind of cargo culting people who get it? This is the thing we need to cargo cult. Focus on the problems, what it means to us in our situation for our people, so that we can move towards our vision and our goals. And there are a lot of great tools. I am a huge fan of A3. Some of you will cringe at that, and some of you maybe haven't heard of it. A3 is a piece of paper, but what's important here is not the piece of paper. I do A3 in a wiki all the time. What's important is the way in which we think about this and having an A3 mindset of plan, do, check, act, right? And really sitting down and saying, well, what's the problem? What is the current condition? What is the goal we're trying to achieve, and what is the root cause analysis? What things are contributing to that problem? It is amazing the amount of thinking that you have to do that goes into this that drastically changes the potential outcome when you've done that. Instead of just glossed over all that and said, well, here's the thing that we want to change, and here's the solution that we want to do. Let's go try that, and we're just going to hope that it magically improves the entire system. A lot of that generally also comes out of the fact that they don't understand the underlying fundamental system. We don't know where we want to go. The old favorite caution, efficiency is doing things right, effectiveness is doing the right things. And as Ackoff likes to say, if you increase the efficiency of the wrong thing, you get worse, not better. It's always important to look at things. I really do this now whenever I'm looking at any kind of improvement. Am I just making a bad thing more efficient, or am I doing the right thing fundamentally? And never, ever, ever, ever sacrifice the system for an individual process. This is why it's so important to know your value streams, to know the system, to know the vision and how it fits into it, so that you're never poking a hole in one part of the ship while you patch another part of it. Deming said, brilliant quote, they're not managing systems. This was talking about a talk. They're not managing systems. They're managing outcomes. They're managing defects instead of the system that produces the defects, right? We saw a lot of lean initiatives fail because they were just trying to patchwork rather than look at the underlying system that was actually causing the flaws in the first place. Jidoka, autonomous automation. Great idea of making sure that we're using tests. This is one thing that we've gotten really good at. Don't allow the patch to be committed until it's been fully tested as well as it can be. There's certain things that have to happen in integration testing or whatnot, but thanks to things like Vagrant, we can now have pretty reasonable test environments that are representative of production on our laptops. Fantastic. Making sure that we're stopping things before they go out and impact the customer. And Netflix has been great at this. Etsy's been great at this. We've had a lot of great ideas about how to do incremental rollouts and A/B test things with users. And this is stuff I think has really, really helped with the quality that we're giving to customers. We want customers to have the experience that they expect to have. And quality doesn't just mean that it's right. It means that it's what the customer intended to get. Gemba, something we all have to be very diligent about. It's something we have to remind ourselves all the time. Go and see. Go to where the work happens. We don't want to sit in our areas and get kind of too comfortable or complacent with how things are. We want to make sure that we're going. One of the great ways to do that is to go and spend time at other team meetings. Look at what they're doing. If they have Kanban boards, look at those Kanban boards. Look at the ticket queues and see what they're dealing with. Particularly for those of us in operational or engineering roles, it's really important that we go and spend time with our support people, with our marketing people, with our sales people. We not just get the fires, but we go and find out what is your daily life like, right? There are things we can do to make their lives better and improve the overall system in profound ways that are probably far more useful than whatever individual thing we're working on at the time. Avoid assumptions when you do that. Investigate the situation and be very rational about it. And then kata, practicing the forms, right? We want to do things the same way again and again and again so that we can teach others. And again, like standardized work, this is not about just what we get in manufacturing, which is getting very good at some type of manual work. For us in engineering and IT, it's really important that we teach people katas of continual improvement, the way in which we attack problems, teaching things like A3, teaching people how to go and see a problem and troubleshoot it in the same way again and again and again, so that we can get the kind of results that we want to get as an organization, and not just fall back into our old patterns of firefighting and kind of frantic troubleshooting. We want to build subconscious habits to the point that people just get it. Again, these are the sorts of things that the Netflix and the Etsy's really get, is their people just seem to get it. Maybe internally they don't, but they seem to really get it. Amazon as well. This is the way we do it. Why? Because this is the way we do it. It's just ingrained into everyone in the organization. So reviewing some of the patterns that we looked at, starting with why, have a vision, a personal vision. Build trusting relationships so that you can share that vision and align the entire culture around that vision. Understand the system by mapping the system in one way or another. Standardize your work, the way in which you go about these things. Manage the flow through that system. Eliminate waste wherever you can. Get rid of futility. Constantly be improving the process through kaizen. Continue to innovate wherever you can to get quality at the source. Stop the line before the bad thing goes out. Be working with other people and practice these things all the time so that it becomes ingrained. Otherwise, this is going to be something that's really exciting for 3 months and then dies. So this is my last point. TQM failed. Here's a really interesting thing about what we're doing is this is not new. We are not the first people to do this. Right? We are riding on the shoulders of giants. Stuff's been around for a long time. There are a lot of great ideas. Why did the quality movement fail? TQM, Total Quality Management, failed miserably. Why? One of the things that personally actually gets me is I've spent some time, I have friends, I live out in the California Central Valley, so I have like manufacturing people as friends and stuff. And I get to go to their factories and hang out. And I always ask, where are the lean people? Because I know all the lean stuff. I'll teach you all the lean stuff, because I know manufacturing better than you know it. Which they normally are like, good for you. And I ask, where are the lean people? And they're like, oh, they're over there. They come down from time to time and make our lives difficult, and then they disappear. And I'm like, that's like DevOps. That's kind of where we're headed. We don't want to do that. So there are lots of different lists out there as to why TQM failed. This one is from the Journal of Management Development on why the total quality management failed, perspective from top management. And this is a list from 1982, not 2 years ago. Managers do not delegate quality to improve everyone in the organization. To involve everyone in the organization. Appropriate consultants to implement the system are not evaluated properly. The consultants don't even know what they're doing. Lack of employee involvement, failure of management leadership with too much emphasis on cutting costs and profits and not customer service. I mean, so take profits and quarterly dividends and say it's the next funding round, right? Poor communication with the workforce, resistance to change. I could take TQM off and replace it with Agile. And people would think I was very smart. There's nothing new under the sun. We have to learn. And this is why I want to make sure that all of us, particularly those of us here, the practitioners, those of us who care about this the most, it's deep in our souls. We have to remember many have gone down this road before and failed miserably. We have to bear that in mind and think about that. Let's not cargo cult. Let's learn from each other. Let's take great concepts of the last 100 years and apply them to our industry uniquely. This is the amazing things that Mary has done in taking lean and not just cargo culting it over, teaching us how to apply it and learn from the principles and apply it to what we're doing. And it's profoundly important. Know who you are, know where you are, and know where you want to be. Current state, future state, right? It's an inside joke. Then make it happen using good repeatable patterns. Practice those. And remember, Feng Shui. Allow the energy to flow. This process has got to be fun. It's got to be energizing. There's a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm. Don't let it burn out. Let it flow, let it flow, let it flow across the table. Go to meetings to talk about this. Close your laptops, right? Clear your schedules. Have an open mind. Don't go in with all the old patterns in your mind. Be ready for change. Allow change to happen and allow it to flow back and forth, and always be aware of your ego, right? All of us bring ego into these sorts of things. It was my idea to go lean. Who cares? You know, let go of it. Let everyone else be as excited as you were when you first found those ideas. 3 books I want to leave you with. There are so many, right? We all love to read tons and tons of books. Fifth Discipline. This is a book that I think a lot of people unfortunately overlook because of the fact that it was a big business book in the early 90s, and you see it in the airport, so you're like, oh, it must not be very good. But to be honest, see, you guys have read it, right? Who's read this book? Has everyone read this book? Read this book. Please read this book. There's something in it called personal mastery. There's something that they talk about there of creative tension. When I got to the part on creative tension, I was like, whoa, this is awesome, right? I mean, creative tension is really important. He brings forward the work started at MIT by Jay Forrester into the future. It's a great book. It's slow to get started with. I'd recommend if you have a hard time reading this book, get the audiobook version and just listen to it on your commute. It's worth your while. You'll really benefit a lot. And also Simon Sinek's new book, Leaders Eat Last. A lot of the content that's in there, I heard a lot of it in the previous presentation, really understanding what is cortisol and what is it doing to your employees and why do they want to kill each other. Kind of a good thing to know. Simon Sinek's very good. And Dale Carnegie, I mean, psychology Deming understood that psychology was important. It is profoundly important. All these things that we're talking about involve human beings. Human beings have pride, they have egos, and working with those things, that doesn't change a lot. I think Dale Carnegie's book, it's the world's first self-help book, essentially. But I think it's probably one that we should all read like every 2 years just to remember, to get along with people, and to work well with people. If you haven't read it, get it. And like I said, one of the tricks that I use, there are some of these books I do have a hard time getting through. Donald's book, for some reason, I just eat up. Sengei's book I had trouble with, but audiobooks are a fantastic way to get through this. Just changing from a pull system to a push system, if you want to put it in those terms. So, thank you.